reading assignment, when you do your homework assignment. We're going to jump to fire door. It's on page 44 as well. Okay, so hold your place on this page, on page 9. We're going to go back to the annex. This is annex for the definition for fire door. And here is the part I want you to highlight. In any instance where any of the required elements is omitted, the assembly rating is void for the purposes of this standard, and the opening protection is not considered equivalent to the labeled or otherwise indicated fire protection rating of the door component. There's nowhere else in the book where it tells us clearly that if something isn't there that's supposed to be there, that the fire rating of the assembly is void. This is as close as it gets. And remember, this is not a mandatory requirement, but it's the expectation, let's say that it's the intent of the standard that all of the required elements be present. They need to be properly installed and they need to function properly in order for us to have a valid fire rated assembly, especially for chapter 6, because we're dealing with a component-based fire door system. So it's something to really pay attention to. I skipped over the first part of that. The fire protection rating of a fire door presumes that the door is installed with the appropriate frame, hardware, and other accessories required by the standard. Do you remember that funny looking slide? This slide. We looked at this the other day. It all starts with the door. The listing of the door, the labeling, the fire rating of the door, the listing of the door, how it needs to be installed, the listing of the door frame, the listing of all the hardware, all of that has to work together as a system. It has to function as a fire door assembly. And only then do we have a valid fire rated door. Any of these elements, if they fail, if they're not working, if they're not what they need to be, we don't have a valid fire rating. Another way of looking at this slide is that, let's say we are required to have a 90-minute opening. So we've got a 90-minute door, we've got a 3-hour frame. But if we put hardware on the door that is not rated for 90 minutes, let's say it's only rated for 20 minutes, then theoretically, and maybe even more than theoretically, that becomes the maximum rating of the assembly. You could look at it that way, which means we may have a valid 20-minute assembly, but we don't have a valid 90-minute assembly, because it all has to work together. Usually, it's the listing of the door, the label and listing of the door, that determines the rating of the assembly. So we have to remember that. We're going to talk about that many, many more times.